Not one more dollar. He says it the way other men say pass the salt. No heat, no speech, no dramatic pause for you to absorb the weight of it. Your father sets down his fork, folds his hands, and delivers the sentence that ends the only life you've ever had, like he's reading a stock price off the wire. Then he goes back to his coffee. The coffee, you notice, is the same drip stuff the housekeeper makes for $4 a tin, in a mug with a chipped handle he's owned longer than you've been alive. You laugh because that's what you do when something doesn't compute. You wait for the rest, the conditions, the lecture, the lawyer's number. There's always a rest. There has never not been a rest. But he just looks at you with the mild patience of a man who has already moved on to the next item on a very long list, and you understand somewhere below words that he means it exactly as stated. Not a threat, a transaction, already closed. Here's the thing about a floor. You never think about it until it isn't there. You spent 29 years walking around on top of a number you never once had to look at, and now somebody's pulled it out from under you and you're discovering midair that you don't actually know how high up you were. You tried to do the math on your own life and you can't. You don't know what your apartment costs, not roughly at all. Someone has always known that for you. Someone has always known everything for you. By dinner, it isn't a conversation anymore, it's mechanical. The black card declines at a restaurant you've gone to since you were 16, and the maitre d' does that thing where his face stays perfectly still, which is somehow worse than if he'd laughed. You try the other card, you try the card you didn't know the name of the bank on. Decline, decline, a polite little chorus of red. You stand there patting your own jacket like the money might be hiding in a different pocket, and you realize you are performing a gesture you've seen poor people make in movies, except this isn't a performance and you have no idea what comes after it. The accounts don't get frozen with any drama either. You open the app, the same app where the number used to sit fat and reassuring, a number with so many figures you never bothered to read past the front of it, and now there's a different number, a small, ugly, honest one, and a notice that the linked accounts have been removed by the primary holder. The primary holder. You were never the holder. You were a guest who mistook the lobby for the deed. The staff are gone by the time you get back. Not fired in front of you, just gone, the way a tide goes out, quietly and all at once and on a schedule somebody set this morning. The house is the same house, the art's still on the walls, the car's still in the garage, your name's still on nothing. That's the part that catches up to you last, standing in a marble hallway that cost more than most people earn in a decade. None of it was ever load-bearing. You leaned your whole weight on a thing that was only ever painted to look like a wall. He didn't take your money, he took your costume. And under it, you're starting to suspect in a cold way that has nothing to do with the temperature, there might not be a man yet. Just the shape one was supposed to grow into. You go to bed in a room you no longer technically have the right to, and you lie there running one stupid question over and over because it's the first real question of your adult life and you have no answer for it. Tomorrow there's a bill. A small one, utilities, a phone, something. It comes due whether or not you understand it. And for the first time, there is no one standing behind it but you. You don't even know how it gets paid. The name is the first thing you reach for because it's the only tool you've ever been handed. You've watched it work your whole life. A word said quietly into a phone and rooms rearranged themselves. Reservations appeared, doors held open. Men twice your age leaned in to listen. So you do the natural thing. You go spend the name. You start with a man who called your father a friend at 3 different galas. You remember the handshake, the way he gripped your shoulder and said, "Come to me if you ever need anything, son." You took him at his word because nobody had ever shown you the difference between a courtesy and a contract. He takes the meeting. He's warm for 4 minutes. Then he asks gently what exactly you'd be bringing to the table, and you open your mouth and discover there is nothing in it. You were going to bring the name was the table, and his face does the maitre d' thing again, that still politeness, and you understand the favor was never to you. It was to the man who could close it off with a sentence at breakfast. So here is the math nobody put in front of you before. The name opens precisely the doors your father personally built, and not 1 inch past them. It is not a key. It is a hallway, and you have just walked to the end of it, and the end is a wall. Everyone who smiled at you was smiling at the engine behind you, and the engine just got switched off, and you're standing in the dark, holding the ignition like it's the car. You try to get an ordinary thing, a job, a real one, the kind with a desk. You've sat on a board. How hard can a desk be? They give you a task on the first morning, something a competent 22-year-old does without thinking, and you sit there staring at it like it's written in a language you were always told you didn't need to learn. You don't know how the thing actually gets done. You only ever knew the version where you said, make this happen, and somewhere out of sight, someone who knew how made it happen. You owned the outcome. You never once owned the doing. And it turns out the doing is the whole thing, and the owning was a costume too. Then you see Marcus. You see him because Marcus is impossible not to see. He's bought a kind of visibility. The new watch, the new car, still wearing its dealer plate, the table at the place where the menu has no prices because if you're asking, you can't. He's the son of one of your father's old rivals, and his father never cut him off, and you used to envy that with a clean, simple hunger. He calls you over. He's 3 drinks into a Tuesday afternoon. He tells you about a trip, then another trip, then a third, and there's a hole in the middle of his voice where a person is supposed to be, and you watch him order the most expensive thing on a menu he can't read either, except in his case, he never had to and never will, and that's the problem. He's not failing. That's the horror of it. He's just idling forever, a beautiful engine bolted to nothing, burning fuel and going nowhere, and he'll do it for 50 more years and call it a life. Lucky us, he says, and lifts his glass and means it, and you feel the floor go out a second time. Because for one ugly second, you wanted what he has, the phone call that fixes it, the check that makes the lesson stop, and then you look at the hole in his voice and you do the arithmetic on a whole human being, and the sum comes out worse than yours. He owns everything and can build nothing, and he doesn't even know it's a wound because nobody ever tested him hard enough to find the soft place where a self should be. You owned everything and could build nothing. The difference between you and Marcus, the only difference is that you got told the cutoff you've been treating as the end might be the one gift in the room. You leave him with his priceless wine. Outside, you reach for the name again out of pure reflex to get a car, to get a table, to get anything, and your hand closes on nothing, and you understand the last cold piece of it. The name is a key to rooms that no longer exist for you. Built by a man you never once watched build them, and you're about to find out you don't even know how he did. So you go looking for the man because you've run out of doors, and the only thing left to open is the question itself. How did he actually do it? You expect a secret. Some deal, some moment, some inheritance of his own you were never told about, a door behind the door. That's how you've always pictured wealth, as a room you either get let into or you don't. You start pulling the real history, the boring paper trail, the early years before the name was a name, and you keep waiting for the trick to surface. It never does. What surfaces instead is so plain it insults you. He bought a house decades ago. A modest one, on an ordinary street, the kind of place a dentist lives. And here's the part your hands actually stop on. He still lives in it. The same house. The man could buy the street, the town, the county, and he is sitting tonight in the same 3-bedroom he picked when he had nothing, eating the $4 coffee, driving a car so unremarkable you've ridden in it 100 times without once seeing it. You always read that as eccentricity, a rich man's quirk, a costume of his own. You're starting to see it wasn't a costume. It was the machine. Run the numbers and the machine shows itself. It was never the size of what he earned. Plenty of men out-earned him and died broke. It was the gap. The distance between what came in and what he let go back out. Held open on purpose year after year and shoveled every dollar of it into things that owned other things and paid him while he slept. He didn't spend his money, he hired it. The house he didn't upgrade is 50 years of upgrades he declined and redeployed instead. And somewhere in a ledger, those declined kitchens and declined yachts compounded into the very fortune you were standing on top of, calling it yours. That's the turn, and it goes down like a stone. The billions were never the thing. The billions were the exhaust. The engine was a habit. Spend under what you make. Own what compounds. Reinvest what's left. Repeat until boring. Repeat past the point where anyone sane would stop. And the habit ran every single day of his life, quietly, while you watched the exhaust and thought it was the car. You resisted. Of course you resisted. Because if that's true, then the thing you were born holding is worthless, and the thing that mattered was never in the will. You go back through the papers looking for the shortcut again, the lucky room, anything that lets the old picture stand. He started with something, he knew someone, he got handed a break the way you were handed a name, and it isn't there. What's there is around 80 cents of every self-made fortune built by people who started with nothing and simply refused for decades to look rich. They buy assets, not applause. Your father is not an exception to that. He's the textbook. And so you sit there with the one realization you spent your whole life insulated from. The money was a result, the habit was the cause. And the habit, the only part that was ever actually the wealth, was never yours, could never have been. It doesn't transfer in a trust. It doesn't survive a handshake. There's no clause in any document that installs discipline in a man who never needed it, and you needed nothing. And so you are financially an infant in a tailored suit. Let me ask you something since we're here, and then I'll get out of your way. What could you build if your last name vanished tonight? Not inherited, not owed to you, built. Sit in that for a second longer than is comfortable. I had to. Because here's the cruelty inside the lesson. The thing that lands last and hardest. You finally know exactly what you want to inherit. Not the house, not the car, not the billions, the engine, the habit, the one asset that actually made the man. And it's the one asset on earth that cannot be inherited. He could leave you everything and still not leave you that. It was never his to give. It's only ever yours to earn, and you haven't earned a dollar in your life. So tomorrow, you're going to try to earn one, a real one, the first. You have no idea yet how small it'll be or how much it'll end up weighing. 237. The first dollar is humiliating, and that's the first thing nobody warns you about. If you pictured anything, a clean start, a smart play, a clever move, something with a little dignity to it. Instead, you do small, dull work that someone needs done and is willing to pay too little for, and you do it badly the first time and a little less badly the second, and somewhere in the second week you have, in actual cleared funds, about $1,000 that nobody on earth gave you. $1,000. Against the billion you were handed, it doesn't register as a rounding error, and it's the heaviest thing you've ever held. Now here is where the old you would have spent it. The old you would have spent it before it landed. A dinner, a gesture, something to feel like himself again, something to buy the costume back one thread at a time. You can feel the pull, physical, in the hands, the same reflex that reached for the name outside Marcus's restaurant. And this is the exact fork your father stood at 50 years ago in a house he refused to outgrow, and you finally understand it isn't a fork about money. It's a fork about which man you're going to be asked again every time a dollar comes in. So you do the thing that felt insane your whole life and feels now like the first sane thing you've ever done. You don't spend it. You put it to work, you run the math out loud to yourself because you don't trust it yet. $1,000 parked in the dullest, most boring index of the whole market, the thing that just quietly owns a slice of every serious company at once, has historically thrown off something like 7% a year after inflation. 7% on $1,000, that's $70 in a year. $70, you almost laugh. You've left bigger tips by accident. But you make yourself sit with the shape of it instead of the size because the shape is the whole secret. That $70 wasn't a wage. You didn't trade an hour for it. It arrived because you owned a thing and the thing worked while you slept exactly the way his money hired itself out while he ate his $4 coffee. For the first time in your life, you are on the side of the table that gets paid for owning instead of the side that pays for wanting. The amount is a joke, the direction is everything, and the direction compounds, which is the part the costume never let you see. Reinvest that 70 instead of spending it, and next year the 7% runs on 1,070, and the year after on more, and the curve that looks flat and pathetic up close is the same curve, the identical machine, not a cousin of it, the same one that turned a dentist's house into a dynasty when you let it run for 50 years instead of 50 days. You're not building a small version of his thing. You're building his thing at the bottom where it was always built, where he built it, where it can only ever start. To make the gap wider, you do the other unthinkable thing. You live like him on purpose. You take the small room. You don't replace the phone. You let the car stay the dull car, and you notice, this surprises you, that almost nothing in your day actually got worse. The dinners you can't afford turn out to have been costumes too. The version of you that needed them was the version that's already dead. Every dollar you don't spend looking rich is a dollar you can put on the side of the table that pays you. The gap between earn and spend isn't deprivation, it's the engine. It was always the engine. He wasn't denying himself a yacht. He was buying a fortune, and a yacht was just the receipt he declined to take. Somewhere across town, Marcus is buying another receipt. Same Tuesday energy, a different watch. The dealer plate finally swapped for real ones on a car he's already bored of. He texts you a photo of it. You look at the photo of the most expensive thing in his life, and then at the dullest line in your statement, the $70 you didn't earn with your hands and won't spend, and you genuinely cannot tell him which one of you is rich because the watch is going one direction and the 70 is going the other, and the only difference between you and him still is that you got told and he never will. The first dollar you make is worth more than the billion you were handed, not because of the amount, because of which way it points. And that night, the pull comes back harder because it always comes back hardest right when you're winning. One call. Your father's number is still in the phone. One call and the lesson stops. The costume comes back. The small room becomes a suite again, and you'd never have to feel the heaviness of a self-made $1,000 ever again. You hold the phone for a long time. You put it back in your pocket. You don't make the call. The bill comes on a Thursday. Utilities, the small honest one, the same kind of bill that on the first night you lay awake over because you didn't even know the mechanism by which such a thing got paid. You remember that. You remember patting your jacket in the restaurant for money that wasn't there. You remember being a man who didn't know what his own apartment cost. You open the app. The number is small now and it's all yours, and you read all the way to the end of it because there isn't much to read, and that small, careful reading is its own kind of wealth. You move the money, you pay the bill, it clears, that's it, that's the whole event. A man pays a utility bill out of money he earned. It would not make the back page of any newspaper on earth. And it is, by a distance you can't quite measure, the largest thing you have ever done, because every other bill in your life was paid by an engine you were merely standing on, and this one was paid by an engine you started by hand at the bottom after it got switched off and you finally had to learn what it was for. You think about Marcus then, not with envy and not even with pity, just with the clean accounting you can finally do. He'll never pay a bill like this. Not because he can't afford it, because he'll never not be able to afford it, and so he'll never find the soft place where a self gets built. He owns everything and can build nothing and will die not knowing that was a wound. You owned everything and could build nothing, and then one Thursday you could. That's the whole inheritance. That's the only one that was ever real. You don't call your father to tell him there's nothing to report. He already knows how the machine ends because he knows how it starts, and he started at the same place alone in a small room, declining the costume $1 at a time. The cutoff was never cruelty. It was the only thing in his whole fortune he could actually leave you, the chance to need the engine badly enough to build your own. Everything else was exhaust. He kept the one real asset out of the will because it can't go in a will. He made you go get it. So, since I've walked the whole day with you, let me leave you with the question I can't stop turning over myself. If the money stopped tomorrow, the salary, the safety net, the name, whatever your version of the costume is, would you survive the week? Not your savings, you, the engine, not the exhaust. Most of us never find out, and the not finding out feels like comfort right up until it's the thing that hollows us out from the inside, the Marcus way, slow and upholstered. If that question landed somewhere it shouldn't have, stay a while. This is the whole conversation here, every week, one honest number at a time. You close the app, the bill is paid. The room is small and the car is dull, and the gap between what you earn and what you spend is open on purpose now, the way it's been open for 50 years in a modest house on an ordinary street in the middle of the country, where a man who could buy anything still drinks the $4 coffee and leaves his children enough to do anything and not $1 more, because he knew long before you did that the dollar he didn't give you was the only one that could ever make you rich.